defending working people and he stood against prorogation of Parliament, and last night he once again stood up against the Prime Minister's efforts to circumvent our democracy. We all know Congress, and we've talked about it a lot this week. It's a case of when and not if a general election will be held. We look forward to Jeremy setting out Labour's vision to win that election. Congress, can you all now give a big welcome to Jeremy Corbyn?
Congress, thank you for that very warm welcome, and thank you for inviting me here. It's an absolute honour to be asked to address you again. And since I got home from Parliament at about 2 o'clock this morning, we've made it here this morning, but I guess some of you have probably got back to your hotels even later than I got home. I'm proud that trade unions and the Labour Party are working as closely together now as we ever have. Because together we are one movement, the Labour movement, the greatest force for progressive change this country has ever known. Let's be proud of our movement and proud of the changes we can and will bring about. So thank you to every single one of you for what you do, for your members and for our society. And thank you to Frances O'Grady for your work as TUC General Secretary. You are a brilliant voice standing up for workers. I want to pay special thanks too to the TUC President, Mark Sawatka. Mark, you are one of the most dedicated and one of the bravest trade union leaders we've ever had. And you are a walking advertisement for our National Health Service and the principles behind it. And your union, the PCS, is doing brilliantly representing workers at Bays, the department in Whitehall, some of whom were here yesterday and have been on strike for 2 months now because the government won't pay them the living wage. Solidarity to them. And it comes to something, doesn't it, when a department in Whitehall has to set up a food bank for people that work in that building because their wage levels are so low, they can only get enough food by going to a food bank. That is modern Britain. I also want to send solidarity to the occupying workers at Harland and Wolff, some of whom have joined us here today. Well done on your campaign to defend jobs and try to ensure there is a future for Harland and Wolff in Belfast. Congress, this time last week, the Conservatives and the DUP had a majority of 1 in the House of Commons. The last time I checked, their majority was down to minus 45. Today, Parliament stands empty, shut down by a Prime Minister running away from scrutiny. But let me say this, we mustn't ever mistake the drama at Westminster for what real politics is about. What truly matters to people isn't resignations and defections and late-night votes in Parliament. For most people, all of that is a million miles away. What truly matters is the reality of their everyday lives, in their community, on their streets, and at their workplace. Real politics, for me, isn't about the parliamentary knockabout, with all its baffling language and procedures. Real politics is about giving power to people who don't have a lot of money and don't have friends in high places, so they can take control of their own lives. Boris Johnson's political strategy is perfectly clear. He wants to stage a showdown over a no-deal Brexit that he can repackage as a battle between Parliament and the people, with the people in this melodrama played by none other than that man of the people, Boris Johnson himself. But the idea that Johnson and his wealthy friends and backers somehow represent people is truly absurd. Johnson and his right-wing cabinet are not only on the side of the establishment, they are the establishment. And this Tory government isn't so different from any other Tory government. They will help the rich to get richer and make working class people pay. Johnson's reckless no deal would destroy jobs, push up food prices in the shops, and cause shortages of everyday medicines that people rely on. And it will disrupt supply chains in manufacturing industry and lead to all kinds of problems in many other places of work. And who bears the cost of that? It wouldn't be Johnson and his wealthy friends. It's not their livelihoods on the line. It will be the rest of us. Just as it wasn't the bankers, who Boris Johnson still defends, who paid the price for the financial crash of 2008, it was tens of millions of working people who had absolutely nothing to do with it. For the Tories, this is about so much more than leaving the European Union. It's about hijacking the referendum result to shift even more power and wealth to those at the top. They will use a no-deal crash to push through policies that benefit them and their super-rich supporters and hurt everyone else, just as they did after the financial crash. Under the cover of no deal, they will sell off our public services, strip away the regulations that keep us safe, and undermine workers' rights. And they will cement all of this in a race-to-the-bottom trade deal with Donald Trump. Be in no doubt, a no-deal Brexit is really a Trump deal Brexit, which will lead to a one-sided United States trade deal negotiated from a position of weakness. It will put us at the mercy of Trump and the big US corporations itching, absolutely itching, to get their teeth even further into our National Health Service. It will sound the death knell of our steel industry and permanently drive down rights and protections for workers. I am not prepared to stand by and let that happen. And we won't be importing the so-called right-to-work laws from the United States, an Orwellian name if ever I heard one, or any other union-busting laws opposed by our comrades and brothers and sisters in the American trade unions that Trump will want to impose on workers in this country. A Trump deal Brexit would be a betrayal of the generations of workers who went before, who fought so hard to win rights and build the public services that bind our society together. That's their legacy, their gift to us. We're not going to let Boris Johnson trade it all away for a sweetheart deal with Donald Trump. That's why our first priority is to stop no deal and then to trigger a general election. Amber Rudd's resignation confirmed that the government is not serious about trying to get a deal in Brussels. As the Prime Minister's top advisor reportedly said, the negotiations are, and I quote, a sham. No one can trust the word of the Prime Minister, who is threatening to break the law to force through no deal. So, a general election is coming. But we won't allow Johnson to dictate the terms. And I can tell you this, we're ready for that election. We're ready to unleash the biggest people-powered campaign we've ever seen in this country and in this movement. And in that election, we will commit to a public vote with a credible option to leave and the option to remain. Labour is on the side of the people in the real battle against the born-to-rule establishment that Johnson represents. We stand for the interests of the many, the overwhelming majority, who do the work, pay their taxes, not the few at the top, who hoard the wealth and dodge their taxes. It's Labour's historic mission to transform people's lives, and that transformation begins in the workplace. In our country, workers have been losing out for far, far too long. For 40 years, the share of the cake going to workers has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Take these figures. In 1976, wages took over 64% of the GDP. That figure is now only 54%. It's no coincidence that the same period has seen a sustained attack on the organisations that represent workers, trade unions. We are here today. We've witnessed a deliberate, decades-long transfer of power away from working people. The consequences are stark for all workers, whether they are members of a trade union or not. Pay is lower than it was a decade ago in real terms. I'm told that the last decade has seen the biggest squeeze on wages since the Napoleonic Wars. Personally, I can't remember that far back, so I tried to contact Jacob Rees-Mogg this morning to check, because he knows these things, but he was fast asleep again on the government benches, as he always is. Things cannot go on as they are. Change is coming, and it must be change that gives power to the true wealth creators, the workers. So today we're announcing that the next Labour government will bring about the biggest extension of rights for workers that our country has ever seen. We will put power in the hands of workers. What will that mean for people? Better wages, greater security, and more say. We'll give workers a seat at the cabinet table by establishing a new Ministry of Employment Rights. Our Shadow Secretary of State for Employment Rights, Laura Pidcock, will explain the detail of our plans when she speaks later today. And I'm looking forward to hearing her speech. But let me give you an overview. At the core of its work will be rolling out collective bargaining across the economy, sector by sector. It is a system they have in many of the most successful economies around the world. It prevents undercutting on wages, fosters workplace stability, and encourages businesses to invest in productivity. It's only by acting together collectively that workers can really make their voice heard. So, within 100 days of our government taking office, we will repeal the Tory Trade Union Act. There's nothing scary about trade unions, however hard the billionaire-owned media tries to paint them as such. They are the country's largest democratic organisations, rooted in the workplace and indeed in the communities. Why should democracy end when you walk into work? Why should the place where you spend most of your day sometimes feel a bit like a dictatorship? If, as an individual, you're asked to work in conditions that are unsafe, what choice do you have? It's take it or leave it. But as part of a union with strength in numbers, you can demand a safe working environment. I want to say this to everybody who's watching beyond this hall. If you're feeling powerless about your work situation, take action now, today. Join a trade union. Thank you. But there's a big role for government too in extending workers' legal rights. Labour will deliver a real living wage of at least £10 per hour for all workers from the age of 16. Action will be taken on the gender pay gap, equal rights for all workers from day one, and, let's be absolutely clear, the end of 0 hours contracts. I'm not finished yet. And Labour won't tell people they have to work until they are 75 before getting their pension. But rights, as all of you in this hall know, only mean anything if they're enforced, and you have the power to enforce them. Too many employers are getting away with flouting laws. Nearly 500,000 people are still being paid less than the minimum wage. We will put a stop to that. We will create a workers' protection agency with real teeth, including the power to enter workplaces and bring prosecutions on behalf of workers. If you're a worker with a boss who makes you work extra hours for no pay or forces you into a dangerous situation, you deserve a government that's on your side and ready to step in to support you. Because a small workplace, working on their own, you're not in a very powerful position if you're asked to do something you shouldn't be doing. You know it's wrong, but you can't do much about it. We need a change of power in our society. Our proposals have been developed in consultation with experts. And I would like to take this opportunity of thanking John Hendy and Keith Ewing in particular for all their help and advice. And special congratulations to John Hendy and Christine Blower today for joining the Labour team. Congress, what we're outlining today will lay the ground for a fundamental transformation of our economy. in favour of the many. But I have some bad news. We've been found out. Absolutely found out, bang to rights. Last week, the Financial Times said that the Labour Party is, and I'm forced to quote this, determined to shift power away from bosses and landlords and to workers and tenants. Well, there's been no shortage of rather unkind reporting about our party over the last few years, but this time they've got it absolutely right. We will put workers on company boards and give the workforce a 10% stake in large companies, paying a dividend of as much as $500 a year to each employee. And we will give tenants more rights, including caps on rent rises. And that principle of empowering people doesn't just apply at the workplace. We will bring rail, mail, water, and the national grid into public ownership. So, the essential utilities that people rely on are run by and for the public, not just the shareholders. I want to thank all of the unions that are working with us to develop our new model of public ownership. I want to thank all of the unions that have put forward great ideas and taken part in very interesting discussions about how we're going to bring this about. We are not recreating the nationalised industry boards of the past. We're creating the democracy of tomorrow. And as we set out how our future economy will operate, we cannot ignore the most pressing issue of all, the climate crisis. Because the destruction of our climate is also a class issue. It's working class communities that suffer the worst air pollution. Think of all the children living on our most polluted streets and where they are. It's working class people who will lose their jobs as resources run down. The super rich and the giant corporations will never solve the major design flaws in our economy that are a cause of the problem, because interests are tied up with them. But working with the trade union movement, we will start a green industrial revolution, creating 400,000 well-paid, high-skilled, unionised jobs in renewable energy and green technologies. And we will locate these new industries in the parts of the country that have been held back by successive governments that have focused on the richest in the City of London. Congress, the general election is coming. There will be a real change of direction. In the next few weeks, the establishment will come after us with all they've got, because they know we are not afraid to take them on. We're going after the tax avoiders. We're going after the bad employers. We're going after the dodgy landlords. We're going after the big polluters, destroying our climate and natural world, because we know whose side we're on. We are creating a society of hope and inclusion, not of poverty and division. Congress, thank you for receiving me here today.
Thank you.